Hi, everyone. So nice to see you here. I love seeing everyone in the chat kind of sharing their hellos and where they're calling in from. I'm Janet O. I'm the Senior Director of Innovation at Cogenerate, and I'm so glad to see all of your names here today and wanted to just welcome you. I'm so excited for this next hour where all of us at Cogenerate get to share the work of our friends at Impact. So these beautiful other people you see on your screen are our colleagues. And Impact is one of our Generation Serving Together grantees. Generation Serving Together is an effort by Cogenerate to age diversify national service, which, like much of society, tends to separate people by age, with AmeriCorps primarily focused on young people and AmeriCorps Senior exclusively for older people. But of course, at Cogenerate, we think rather than working separately, what if we combine the talents of younger and older people to solve their community problems together? So early in my career, I had the privilege of working on a powerful multi-generational team of AmeriCorps members firsthand through the program called Experience Corps. And we had AmeriCorps members who were 50 and older serving as mentors and tutors in schools, while the younger AmeriCorps Vistas, many in their 20s, served as the volunteer coordinators. But we found that that age diverse model is very much the exception. It is not the rule. And sparking more innovative models for bringing youngers and olders together in service is what motivated us to launch Generation Serving Together. And the timing could not be more ripe for investing in cogenerational service as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of AmeriCorps this year. More Perfect, a coalition of national service and bridge building groups that includes Cogenerate, launched a bold plan last week, calling for a dramatic expansion of opportunities to engage 1 million young people and 500,000 older Americans in national service by 2033. The plan describes national service as uniquely poised to bring generations together across divides for mutual benefit and social impact, and points to the need for new service models, much like what you're about to hear from Impact. Okay, so just to give you a sense of what we're doing here together today, first we're going to be hearing more about Impact, so you get a sense of what they do. Then we'll get to hear from two AmeriCorps members, one younger and one older, about their work together in schools. Then we're going to hear about Impact's survey of 350 of their members to get a bigger picture view of the work that they're doing. And then finally, we'll have time for Q&A. So as your questions arise, please put them in the chat. Okay, so with that, I'd like to introduce Shawana Coleman, Executive Director of Impact Georgia Reading and Math Corps, to tell us more about Impact. Welcome, Shawana.
Yes, thank you so much, Janet. I'm super excited to be here. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Shawana Coleman, the Executive Director of Georgia Programs with Impact. Impact is a nonprofit organization based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. We've been growing since the early 2000s when our first program, Reading Corps, launched in 2003. Math Corps followed in 2008, and since then, we've grown to offer programs nationally in 16 states plus the District of Columbia. Our programs are administered through a formal partnership with Serve Minnesota, and they're fueled by research from the National Science Plus Service Collaborative. Today, we offer evidence-based AmeriCorps programs in 3 focus areas: education, environment, and healthy futures. We're leaders and innovators in national service and employ 350 employees across the country. Together, we support more than 3,000 AmeriCorps members as they serve their communities and make an incredible collective impact. Just last year, we served more than 50,000 students nationally. Today, We will be sharing more about our opportunity to engage with Cogenerate, to learn more about cogeneration, serving together, and to share our AmeriCorps members' lived experiences in serving together. As an organization, because we have members of different backgrounds and generations, it was really important to us to find ways to intentionally enhance the cogenerational experiences, as well as to learn more about how other organizations are engaging in this practice. Cogenerate afforded us this opportunity, and we are so excited to share more about that experience today. As I stated earlier, we will be talking to two of our tutors today. I am excited to moderate this conversation about cogeneration serving together with two of those amazing AmeriCorps members. Cheryl, who serves as a Reading Corps tutor, she is 56 years old and joined our Reading Corps team after being off work for a year and a half and was looking for an opportunity that would adhere to her accommodations needed. And I'm also joined by Penny, who serves as a Math Corps tutor. She is 24 years old, and she joined our Math Corps team when she identified her interest in education after working in retail for a few years. Hi, Cheryl and Penny. Awesome. So again, excited to have you all join us today to talk about a few things about your experiences with Reading Corps and Math Corps. Will you share with us what exactly you do as a Reading Corps and Math Corps tutor?
I will start. So I am Penny. This is my second year working with Math Corps, and my primary job is to pull students. I have a caseload of 12 groups of 2. So I see 24 students every day, and I see them for about 20 minutes every day where we play different math games and math interventions to develop their math skills. Cheryl, would you like to go, or should I say more on?
Yes, there. So my name's Cheryl, and it is my second year in Reading Corps, K through 3. I get to meet with these precious children who are just learning sounds and how to put those sounds together into words. And by 3rd grade, they're reading fairly proficiently, so we're working on their fluency. And I think the best part of it all is the relationships, getting to know these children and their personalities.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing a little bit more about what you do on a daily basis. So it is clear to see that you enjoy the work that you're doing with the students inside of the schools. And so what I would like to know a little bit more about is your experience working with different generations. Have you found that in working together that there are times when your work is easier because you come from different generations? Or tell us a little bit more about that.
I do notice working with Cheryl that just because of my growing up in like the digital age, I am a lot more fluent with computers. I know my way around a web browser, or I know like certain shortcuts you can use on keyboards to make things a lot easier, which is really good because Math Corps is very tech heavy on certain days. So I think Math Corps would, I think, certainly be a struggle for older members of the team who aren't quite proficient with technology yet.
And I want to second that. My first weeks on board, Penny was my go-to person. I was told by my internal coach, if you have any questions, go to Penny. She knew the schedule. She'd been there a few months before me. And technology, she definitely knew. And there were some meltdown moments where Penny came in and pressed one button and everything, poof, was better. But on the flip side of it, I come from an education background, and I was able to help some of our other Reading Corps members kind of integrate into the classroom because I felt comfortable there. I taught for 15 years and helped them to kind of sit down and get to know the children. So I felt like I brought that experience to it. Maybe it's not technology, but more relationship. I brought that.
Wow. So it does sound like working together cogenerationally has had some challenges for you that you've been able to overcome together, as well as being able to help one another and help other tutors get acclimated to the settings. So are there any other challenges that you've seen that have bubbled up and you found that it was harder because of your generational differences? I know, Cheryl, you talked about having worked in the classroom before and what that looks like. And I know, Penny, you're probably closer to having just come out of the classroom, a little bit closer to there. And so were there any challenges that made it a little bit harder because of your generational differences with how you were able to acclimate to your roles?
Oops, Cheryl, you're on mute.
Okay, I think for me, thank you for the help, Penny. For me, some of the languages that were being used by the children and some of the younger tutors, I would need to just stop and ask, okay, what exactly does that mean? Yeah, I think that would be the main thing for me was the language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being of the youth, I'm much closer to the students' age than Cheryl is. So I happen to share a lot of the interests of these kids, like big into Pokemon, big into anime. But I feel like because I'm very relaxed, very go with the flow. Cheryl's a much more professional member of our team, and I really admire that because I feel like sometimes I just don't know what to do with myself. But yeah, it's easy to get confused, that's for sure.
Yep, Penny's at the front door greeting students as they come in and talking to them about Pokemon and just making their day at the beginning of the day. So going with the flow in that way is really, really good.
Well, it seems like you all have been able to find ways to make it work for you, co-generationally serving together, because it's always great to have someone that you can glean some wisdom and knowledge from, Penny, as you just said. And then, of course, Penny just had to help Cheryl to let her know you're still on mute. And so we were able to see it play out right here in our webinar today. And so I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your experience serving as tutors with Reading Corps and Math Corps. As you all can see, the impact of cogeneration serving together extends far beyond the students that we are serving, but it also provides opportunities for meaningful engagement amongst our AmeriCorps members. And so now we will hear from Janet to introduce my colleague, David.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that conversation. And Cheryl and Penny, thanks so much for giving us a little glimpse of what it's like to be tutors in a school. So now I'd like to invite David Parker to the conversation. And David, you're a researcher, right? So you have a different perspective to share. And I would love for you to talk about the survey that you all did and what you learned from it.
Yes, I'm so excited to share the survey that we did in the context of the neat intergenerational service relationships that honestly, before we worked with Cogenerate, we were aware they existed and that we had them in our network, but we weren't really as intentionally tracking them, or surely needed a couple pushes or two to be like, wonder what kind of value we're getting out of this. So it was really a neat part of the cohort and the partnership with Cogenerate to kind of be able to do this. But before we do this, is the slide showing the neat intergenerational team that existed at the school? I see Penny and Cheryl here with a couple other members of their team. And I think that really speaks to why we picked them and found them and really appreciated their testimonials for their experience in doing educational service together as a team. With lived experience crossing different ages. So I get to talk about the survey that Janet mentioned. And the survey was a really neat opportunity for us Long story short, the goal was to build off of research that I think the Cogenerate team had done with other partners. If you haven't seen it, you could reach out to Janet or kind of probably dig through their web presence and find the NORC report that they did. As a researcher, I was intrigued by that and took away some neat findings from that. But the summary of that existing research was a place like NORC, which is a big research outfit, can really establish a confident statement around kind of public interest in something. And so it was very clear that there was public interest, hope, potential for working together across generations. What was neat for us with our push and with Shawana as a part of the team and our colleagues was that we could be in a position to start exploring that one step further, which is, okay, so there's interest and there's hope and there's some anticipation for the value of intergenerational service and work together, but we could go out and explore it. And we could actually survey and see how it went. So that's really what we did. As you already know from the example with Cheryl and Penny, the context that we were really surveying folks were AmeriCorps members that were a part of our AMPAC programs that were in the same location, potentially seeing and interacting with each other on a regular basis. There's some researchy things that are worth noting to give context to the survey. Thing number one is we had a pretty decent sized sample. In research, it's fun when you can get to hundreds of numbers, hundreds of participants. I think it's also worth noting that a nearly 70% response rate is kind of testament to the neat structure we have and kind of the communication channels we have with our core of core members. And then for timing, it was last school year, so, you know, it was kind of recent. And folks had up to essentially the full kind of academic calendar in their service to have spent time together. The survey took place in the spring. So the next few slides, I'll just give you some quick context, and then I'll get into the findings speaking to that value. But it's helpful to know what the distribution of folks were who responded to the survey. And you can see that here. I don't think I need to talk through it a ton, but it skews a little bit towards the baby boomer generation. We use that language for the survey. But that's not to say that there wasn't good representation across the different generations. 13% of 350 is still a good chunk of people. So we were happy to see some good representation, even including the silent generation. So we like to say, oh, I forget what our catchphrase is, but basically you can do service at darn near any age, 18 to 80 or 90 or plus. If you are able to be a part of your community lifestyle wise, it's great. We love to have you. And service is a great thing to be able to do, as I'm sure many people on this call know. So then in the demographics of who completed the survey, it did skew a little white and female. That's probably reflective of perhaps service in general. It's certainly reflective of the locations where we were able to conduct the survey. In Minnesota and in education, those particular demographic characteristics feature fairly heavily. We're, of course, like all, I think, AmeriCorps initiatives across the country, trying to make sure that it's an accessible experience. So that's changing, and we're excited about that. But that doesn't mean that we didn't have some representation outside of that. Over 10% of the respondents were men, over 3%, enough to get a feel that there was some representation from the demographics listed here. Also worth noting, some folks weren't comfortable sharing their demographics, and therefore they might have fallen into a category that we just don't know. Okay, just about done with that. We're kind of getting into the meaty stuff. So I hope this is where we're starting to pick up and perk our ears up. A first important preliminary question is, well, okay, so how much did they serve together? So this is intergenerational service. It would be interesting to know what is the nature of that service together. So this is two different ways of kind of quantifying that intergenerational service experience. On the one hand, you've got kind of how much didn't you interact a lot, or did you interact a little, right? Throughout the course of a year, did you basically say hello at bus drop-off times, say, I hope you had a good day? Or were you sharing space, and were you really interacting with each other and kind of sharing resources on a regular basis? And similarly, because the nature of our service can span different starting periods as I think we all know, life can happen, and so people may need to end their year of service early. We just wanted to have a sense of how long a time period were folks engaged in that intergenerational service. So the neat thing here for future reference is that we have a sizable percentage of people that were both in regular frequent contact and were in regular frequent contact likely over an extended period of time. So here we are. We're into the fun interactions. This is what we found. And this is what it was fun to process with the Cogenerate team and the other members of our cohort. So the types of interactions that folks had, and they could kind of list all of the different interactions that pertain to their service experience. What you see here, I've got some highlighted because I think it's neat to draw our eyes to the findings that are of most interest, or at least were to us. So the first two here highlighted are, we helped each other problem solve, and we shared resources and ideas. If you pause and think about what that means, that's a pretty deep and substantive engagement. So that reflects an opportunity for folks to be in more frequent and deeper contact and interactions. And you can see some of the other ones there. I wanted to share all of the results just so folks can kind of think about it, maybe ask questions when we get to the Q&A. We know that this is a front end of a lot of research that could happen, and it's kind of a neat movement to be a part of with Cogenerate. So as you look at that, think of your questions. But I also highlighted here what would, to us, be considered something deeper happened here, right? A personal connection was made. We interacted socially outside of our service site. We consider ourselves to be personal friends. Those percentages aren't as big, but we maybe wouldn't expect those to be big for everybody. Like our personal relationships are personal. We're going to have some selective just individualization over who we enter into significant relationships with, even within our same age. But what this tells us is that there's a decent amount of that happening across generations, which is kind of neat. So then this is really probably our main slide, and it also has a lot of information on it. So I'll just kind of set it up and highlight a few of the main things that are also already highlighted here, but I'll help organize it as you look through it. What we're really getting at here was the big question: what was the value of intergenerational service? And I would organize the kind of clusters of highlighting. You've got the top two, then you've got the two over into the third column, and then you've got the bottom two. There's a few things to point out. The numbers are decently high. The percentages are pretty high in terms of agree or disagree, or agree or strongly agree to the question that was kind of being asked. So the value of intergenerational service increased my opportunities to interact meaningfully with people of a different generation. It's neat to see that at 70% effectively. I hope folks are seeing that. And the way I would cluster this and that next one is that this is service affording opportunity, affording exposure. Whereas I think Janet said at the outset, society tends to kind of silo us and put us into contact with those who are at a similar stage in life or a similar background. It's neat to just see alone that service is offering exposure, opportunities to engage across the different generational lines. So that's that kind of cluster. And then you move over to the right, and this is where kind of the findings are causing us for pause and reflection. The majority of people responded that these two, I think, load on to kind of attitude and perception. If you read through those two that are in the next two rows down, improved my attitude about people of a different generation. That was kind of neutral. And in full transparency, we don't have a strong interpretation of that other than that's what folks reported. But that, I think, even adds to a little bit more the interesting nature of the third cluster of findings, which are, I think I have one more highlighting to do. Let's just get that. Don't have the last, something happened. The very last row is the main takeaway. So I'm going to say it at least twice here. But all three of these last rows are really about action, right? So something that's a little bit more actionable in what their intergenerational service experience afforded them. For example, help me realize I can learn from people of a different generation. Again, we're close to that 70% saying that. And that does feel actionable to us. That's like, oh, hey, I have ways I can interact, and I think it goes much deeper than technology support, for example. But the one that really, I think Shawana and I, and hopefully Cheryl and Penny really have this resonate with them too, that very last one, made me a better tutor. That's kind of what AMPACT is all about in this particular context. It's about tutoring. It's about that educational support that an adult who cares about their community and their kids can provide. And having upwards of 70% of people say, having somebody from a different generation do that with me, next to me, along the way, and having that be a pretty high percentage in the context of, we know they're willing to say, I don't know, because we just saw that on the attitude side. I think that's pretty profound. That's what it felt like to us. And so those are the main findings. With the note on the right, you likely have already seen that I'll just point out, which is to say these were the just general findings across the board. But what we also did, just to kind of acknowledge that we knew some folks engaged in more service together for longer periods of time. In the survey, this is a researchy thing, so bear with me. We just selected the folks who had a lot of exposure together and for a long period of time, and then looked at the numbers. And what that note on the right is really getting across is, imagine all of those numbers that we highlighted just being up 10%. That's more or less what happened. So that checks out. The more time you had together over a longer period of time, the more you felt like you could be a better tutor. Oh, there's those highlights, found them. And so I'll just end here with what we like to do that really complements I think the comments from Cheryl and Penny, which is, with a survey, you always have a chance to say, hey, what else did you feel? Would you like to share a story? Would you like to share an anecdote? It's more of a qualitative response to the survey. And this is literally one. And yes, I'm aware I'm breaking rules 1 through 3 of PowerPoint. Small font, too many words, probably not legible. So I did that intentionally because we'll see if the highlighting works. Aha. Wanted to highlight a couple of the takeaways here, which is just, this person clearly, this is one person, clearly had kind of a moved experience. They had a kind of a life-changing experience, and they weren't alone. But some of their comments captured what we interpreted from the data, which is just to say, for example, I may have held certain stereotypes or misconceptions about individuals from different generations, but my experience has shattered those preconceived notions. That's really powerful. I think that really speaks to, they knew they had a bias going into it, and they're aware that that bias is changing going away from it, which is great. And then there's a little bit of speaking, in addition with this part of the quote, to the actionable agency sense. I've developed an ability to bridge generational gaps and find common ground, fostering effective collaboration and mutual respect. That's neat. They feel like they have some agency complements of this intergenerational experience to continue nurturing intergenerational relationships. Janet, I think I'm done there. I think this is the part where we get interactive. So thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, David. Thank you for walking us through those findings in a very human and understandable way. So always appreciate that. And so I'd welcome people's questions. I have some questions that I'd love to start with, and then as the questions come in from the chat, we can field those. But I kind of wanted to ask Penny and Cheryl, David presented the findings of your peers, so 350 other tutors like you. And I'm curious, like, what you thought of those findings. Did they resonate with you?
I think I would fall in a very similar line of thinking of as my peers. I'm so sorry, school just let out for the day. But yeah, I would agree with my peers of working together with older team members has definitely helped me become a better tutor. It's helped me get more comfortable in my role here. And I absolutely love hanging out with my reading corps team. I love to sit and chat with my older peers.
I have children, adult children, the same age as Penny. It's fun to get to know her as a person, to know, like we talked about, the different language that they use and their interests. Penny has helped me understand a lot more to help me relate to my own children better, which I am eternally grateful for. Um, and just the energy that the younger generation builds in a room, the excitement and the creativity. Penny is an artist, and you saw in our group picture some of her artwork that she put in our group space. And yeah, it has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. And Penny, just a follow-up question for you in terms of how working either with Cheryl or others has helped you be a better tutor. I wonder if you could just give us either an example or just a little bit more detail, because I think that's when I saw that result, David, I was very intrigued and excited. And I was also curious about what that looks like in a school.
So we actually have a really good example from earlier this school year. In Minnesota, or at least our school district, once a month, we have a half day of school. So teachers have like a prep day in the middle of the month. And it's a very tight schedule. It's a very tough day to work around to get to tutoring. And I'm not the type to fight scheduling. I let my kids stay with their teacher all day, but Cheryl was actually very proactive, and she went and she found all of the half day schedules for all of the teachers so that maybe we can start to work towards grabbing those students on those half days, which I thought was very proactive. It was very professional of her versus I just decided it's a half day. Let the kids have fun. Let them stay.
Yeah, thank you, Penny. Okay, well, I want to welcome everyone to ask questions of each other. So I don't need to hog the question role. So if David or Shawana or Cheryl or Penny, if you have questions for anyone else, please jump in. Duncan, maybe I'll ask you if you want to highlight one from the chat, and then we'll see who else has a question.
Hey everybody, just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Duncan, and I'm just monitoring the chat for all your questions to make sure we don't miss anything. Christina has a really interesting question for David, which is, having conducted this survey and analyzed the results, what questions would you have, what do you wish you would ask if you had to do it again?
Okay, that's great. Thank you for putting me on the spot here. I'm gonna have to think live. Like, I've got genuine research brain for this, which is like almost, it's on the front end, and it resonated so much with me to kind of build on the NORC finding from that report that I saw go in the hyperlink, that I haven't really thought about that, which is a little embarrassing to say, but I can come up with something. I do think that expanding, I'll work backwards from kind of the main event for me, which is like, it made me a better tutor. Wow. Right. So let's hear more about, I think that follow-up question to Penny was great. We are lucky that we could just hear from Penny and the examples that she shared with Cheryl and that interaction there, but we had 350 people. I think it would have been great to probe that a little bit more, but I think it's worth sharing, and Janet was really gracious and kind of sharing with us what Cogenerate's take was, which is we can be kind of candid here. This is a learning community. I don't think we knew that going. So we put questions in the survey, and I saw a couple of comments about folks showing interest in doing surveys. I think it's important, or at least okay, hopefully, to share. We had to start the survey work at a certain level, right? That was kind of covering a few different angles. And once you start to get some information on, oh, wow, there seems to be something here, then you can kind of start probing in deeper. Yeah, so I'll maybe stop there just to make sure that we can have a good discussion. But in hindsight, if we'd known we'd get that tutor, it made me a better tutor. I'd love to have heard more and maybe kind of ask kind of a branching set of questions on how and in what ways.
And so I want to ask Shawana this question as a program person, Shawana, like now that you see the results, because as David mentioned, it was kind of an exploration, like the survey revealed to you some of the riches that you have that maybe you knew anecdotally, but not at this level. I'm curious how you might make different design choices in your program, or how you might change your program, like for everyone who's listening who does work in this field and they're thinking about like, how do you get the results like with intention if you were setting out to do that? Are there certain things that you might suggest or different ideas that are coming to mind given the survey results?
That is a great question, Janet. I think you kind of alluded to it earlier that we kind of stumbled into this work unintentionally. It was something that we were doing because we were trying to pair people that we felt would be good matches inside of the schools. And as you can see from the demographics, AmeriCorps members are, from what we like to say, 18 to alive. And so our thought process is, if someone has a passion for service, we take ordinary people and coach them to doing extraordinary things. And because of this experience, we have now sought to be more intentional about the way that we are pairing and placing our tutors in schools. And so beforehand, it was about being the right fit for the school community, being the right fit for the demographics that they were serving, their skill sets. But now we're also saying, let's see if we can pair them cogenerationally so that there is a lived experience inside of this experience and being an AmeriCorps member as well. This really happened organically for us, and we learned a lot, and we seek to, again, definitely be more intentional now and create those workspaces that are best serving all of the generations, inclusive of those students, the communities that we're serving, and just making sure the engagement is meaningful across the board. And it's not just about the programs. That's of course top tier, but it's not just about the programs. It's about the service and the experience of those tutors as well. And we're hoping to perfect it as much as possible so that we can allow other organizations the opportunity to glean some of these best practices from us, as we will continuously be seeking to do the same thing, being able to glean from them. This cohort of professionals that we had the chance to work with this time, they definitely broaden our thinking around our practices in the cogeneration serving together, because it was organic for us. And after seeing those results, we were like, we might be on to something here. And so now we're seeking to be intentional about it across the organization.
Thank you, Shawana.
Yeah, go ahead,
Could
Jill. Sorry.
Thank you. I just want to say I came in with a bias. I was a trained licensed teacher. I thought teaching reading, I know what to do, but AmeriCorps really took us all to a common ground. You know, they talked about our biases and being aware of that coming in. That training was wonderful, and learning to be humble and learn from my mistakes and be vulnerable to the students, that I can learn from my mistakes and help them see that they can learn from their mistakes also.
Janet, is right. Can I add on to that? Is that okay?
Please.
I want to highlight one of the learnings that we had as part of the cohort, which was, and this is related to some questions in the comment line about kind of training or curriculum. We have, this is the royal we, AMPACT has some great resources for members to build their self-awareness, to build their own understanding of their cultural identities, to build essentially the toolkit to reduce any biases that might happen. Like as Cheryl was saying, but we didn't have an ageism resource going into this, but we do now. That is a direct product, I think, of our kind of partnership with this. And I think that's really profound for a lot of reasons. One, if you're in an intergenerational service context, that's going to be helpful for your partners, but also I think in any context, you're going to, and I think this is the magic of Cogenerate's mission, which is intergenerational interactions are everywhere. You can't get away from them. And that's a good thing, particularly in an educational context. If you're an adult serving students, that bias that we've talked about, and I saw an example, I think, of another tutor in the chat, somebody who had some service experience in the chat and noticed even differences within students' ages. And any interactions you might have with your other educators in the building. All of that is ripe for being more self-aware of the potential biases you bring. And I think that speaks to that intentionality that our mission now has, the resource that members can go to, they can see, they can interact with their support networks and their training, that exists now. So it's a great product of this work together.
Thank you, David. Duncan, is there another question you want to ask?
Yeah, there are a couple of people who are interested in a little bit more about the logistics in terms of the training and the curriculum. And this might be a good question for Penny and Cheryl. What was the process like of joining this program? And Cheryl, you talked a little bit about what you expected, but what did the training look like, and then the curriculum?
It was overwhelming. I went from being on bed rest for a back injury and no emails to all of a sudden I'm getting 20 emails a day. And I'm like, oh, here I go. And they really were great about setting guidelines for us. Like, here's a goal. We need you to reach this amount by this date. And helping me get back into the work environment again after having a year and a half off with my back injury. But yeah, we covered, not only what we're doing with the student, the interventions, but we covered things like bias. And there were many other side topics that we were introduced to as part of our training. And then even when we got on site, there were people there helping us integrate into the school environment and helping us to learn the schedules and finding us a location where we could work with the students. It was very overwhelming after being out of the workforce for a year and a half, but well guided along the way.
Yes, I described it as learning in 2 weeks what teachers get to learn in 4 years. And it is a bit overwhelming that I wasn't quite prepared for when I first started working with AmPact, but there were some positives to it where most of our trainings come through the learning management system, or LMS. And it was very nice to have it all compact and in one spot versus other jobs I've worked where they've had us do trainings through like 6, 7 links or articles that we had to read. So even though at first it was overwhelming, once I got used to the flow of the training, it was very nice to have it all in one spot, and it was easy to understand. And I liked the broad range of topics within it, everything from what a tutoring session will look like to how to approach either your peers or students in a way that will be effective for your relationship.
Cheryl, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Janet.
Okay, and then I'll turn it back to you, Duncan. But Cheryl, I was struck by something you said that I've heard other people say too, which is in this intergenerational relationship with Penny, you had an opportunity to better understand your adult children. And I just thought that that is such a gift. Like, that's an amazing gift for you and your family. And so I was just wondering, maybe you could speak a little bit more about that. And Penny, I'd love to kind of hear your reflections, for you as a person, because I think what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of ways that you're helping each other become better tutors, but this personal relationship part is also very important. So I'm curious to know, when in the day do you get to have those kind of side conversations, and just how it's kind of changed you as a person.
Thank you. Last year, I was less than part-time, so I had more open spots in my schedule between students. And we have in our building something called the Dome, and it's a central play area, and then the classrooms are around the outside of it. And so there would be times where Penny was tutoring in the Dome, and I was in a classroom on the outside of it, and our schedules were both open at the same time. She allowed me the opportunity to kind of bounce scenarios off of her, like, what would you think if I said this as your mom? Or, and so I kind of got to maybe filter some of my words before I spoke to my children and understand how I might still be over mothering them, possibly. I'm still working on admitting that, but yeah.
Like Cheryl said, we do have some sporadic openings in our schedules from where we collaborate with teachers to find the best times to pull from their class, and just happens at either early in the morning or closer to the end of the day. Cheryl and I will just find times to chat. And personally, I do not speak to my parents. There's just some relationships that just didn't quite work out as an adult with my parents. So it is really nice that Cheryl can like bounce off of me to kind of figure out like how to work her relationships with her own children. But it's nice for me because I've lost that connection to my parents. I still have Cheryl, so I still kind of get that interaction with that motherly age group, and it's so special.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Penny. That was that really moved me. So yeah, thank you for sharing something very personal. Duncan, was there something else from the chat that you wanted to ask?
There's a really interesting question here from Jennifer, which is thinking about how the intergenerational relationships you formed in AmPact may have influenced you more broadly. Thinking about the relationships you formed there, did that help you form any tools or skills to tackle other differences in your life?
I guess I kind of answered that maybe with working with my children and understanding a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Penny, maybe I could give you a moment to talk or to think, and just, I don't
Yeah.
think the question was meant for me, but it nevertheless kind of sparked a couple things, which is just to say it's opened up a lot of different paths for us to think about how we center intergenerational intentionality within our work. One kind of adjacent opportunity for us is our educational tutoring service experiences have a fairly neat coaching component to it. It's one of the ways that folks in their service experience, like Penny and Cheryl, have ongoing support and not just a training and good luck. It's a training, good luck, and we're here to help, right? So like there's somebody that swings by, and I think we're exploring this broadly across the different ways that kind of human bias can get in the way of relationship forming and effectiveness, but how the intergenerational kind of relationship could be attended to via that coaching is one example. And I think there's a lot of others, but I think that's an example of how this work has had some ripple effects with other parts of our work. Did I buy you some time, Penny? And maybe you maybe don't need to reply.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Penny, no need to respond if you don't have an answer to that question.
Yeah, I just feel like Cheryl and I both have kind of already shared a little bit of what our answers would have been for that.
Okay, great. Well, I had one final question, which is actually not a question anymore based on our conversation, but I just wanted to add that, like, a lot of times when I talk with younger and older pairs about what they learn from one another, what skills are being brought, I will tell you the most common thing I hear is always around technology. I always hear something along the lines, and we've said it here too as well, that younger people bring tech skills and digital savviness, and older people bring life experience and wisdom. And I hear it so much that, like, it makes me wonder if it's an oversimplification. And I feel like our conversation today kind of demonstrated that. Like, while that is true and that's how we started, this conversation then led to a very unexpected place that I wasn't imagining, which was beyond like tutoring and mentoring and how do you connect with the child over Pokemon? How do you find the time in a teacher's schedule to like do more one-on-one intervention? There's also this magical thing of like, I found someone where I could bounce my parenting ideas off of and get some feedback before I make potentially mistakes that I might regret, which as a mother, I think that's amazing. And Penny, I hear you talking about like, you have an opportunity to like provide your heart something that maybe it yearns for and it doesn't currently have. And so when I think about like what younger and older people are bringing and providing, it kind of reinforces that, like, I think we say tech because it's the easiest thing to point to, but that there's so much more that's happening. And I just want to thank everyone here on the call for sharing so openly and helping us be in our head and helping us be in our heart and like back and forth again, and just this like incredibly beautiful work that you all are doing. Thank you so much. And with that, I think Duncan is going to launch a poll so we can better understand from the audience about their work and their enthusiasm for cogeneration potentially. So thank you, everyone. And I hope you all have a great day.